What if the moment a coffee cup shatters on your kitchen floor, you've just witnessed the single most devastating argument against an all-powerful God that physics has ever produced? Here's the thing that nobody in a theology class will ever tell you. The universe has a direction. Not a moral direction, not a spiritual direction, but a mathematical one. Scientists call it entropy. The second law of thermodynamics says that disorder always increases. Always. Without exception. Not sometimes, not usually, always. That broken cup will never on its own reassemble itself, leap back onto the table and refill with hot coffee. Not in a billion years, not in a trillion. Never. The pieces scatter, the heat dissipates, the structure collapses, and the universe moves forward. Now here's where it gets shocking. If God is real, all-powerful and capable of miracles, then God must be able to reverse entropy. But reversing entropy would require violating the most fundamental, most tested, most unbreakable law in all of science. So either God doesn't exist, or physics is lying to you. And physics has never once been caught in a lie. What if every miracle ever recorded in human history is not proof of God, but proof of humanity's desperate need to believe in magic? Let's be brutally honest. When people report miracles, water turning to wine, the dead rising, seas parting, what they are describing is entropy running backwards. Dead cells reorganizing, liquid molecules spontaneously restructuring into something complex, massive bodies of water defying gravity and pressure simultaneously. Every single one of these events requires the universe to undo what it just did. But here's the cold, hard, scientific reality. We have never, not once, in any controlled environment, in any laboratory, in any documented observation, recorded entropy reversing itself spontaneously. Not even by 1 degree, not even in a subatomic particle. The universe does not go backwards. So when someone tells you God performed a miracle, what they're really telling you is that God temporarily repealed the second law of thermodynamics, the most verified law in the history of human science. And that means either every physicist who ever lived is wrong, or the miracle never happened. You decide which is more likely. What if the reason you believe God is all-knowing is because nobody ever handed you a physics textbook and said, "This is what knowing actually looks like"? Quantum mechanics, the science of the very, very small, tells us something profoundly disturbing. At the subatomic level, the universe is fundamentally uncertain. Not uncertain because we lack information, not uncertain because our instruments are imperfect, uncertain by design at the deepest level of reality. This is called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. You cannot know both where a particle is and how fast it's moving at the same time, not because of human limitation, but because the information does not exist. The universe itself does not know. Now ask yourself, if God is all-knowing, does God know the exact position and momentum of every particle simultaneously? If yes, God is violating quantum mechanics. If no, then God is not all-knowing. There is no middle ground here. The mathematics is not negotiable. Either God breaks quantum physics, or God is limited. And a limited God is just a very powerful person, not the divine creator of the cosmos. What if the concept of God outside of time, the most popular escape route theologians use, is itself a scientific impossibility that collapses under the weight of relativity? Einstein showed us something so strange, it still sounds like science fiction. Time is not a constant. Time bends. Near a black hole, time slows down dramatically. At the speed of light, time stops entirely. Time is woven into the fabric of space. It's not a separate river flowing outside the universe. It is part of the universe. So when theologians say God exists outside of time, they are saying God exists outside of space-time. But space-time is not a container. It's the structure of existence itself. Saying something exists outside space-time is like saying something exists outside of existing. It is a sentence that sounds meaningful, but mathematically means nothing whatsoever. It is the intellectual equivalent of saying, I live in a house that has no inside or outside. General relativity does not give you a platform outside reality. There is no outside. There is only the universe, expanding, curving, bending, and nothing beyond it that physics can point to. What if fine-tuning, the most beloved modern argument for God's existence, is actually the greatest example of humans being terrible at probability? You've heard it. The gravitational constant is so perfectly calibrated that if it was slightly different, stars wouldn't form, life wouldn't exist, and therefore God must have set it. This is called the fine-tuning argument. It sounds magnificent until you apply actual mathematics to it. Here is the problem. We have exactly one universe to observe. 1. You cannot calculate a probability from a sample size of 1. That's not statistics. That's a guess wearing a tuxedo. Additionally, we don't know what other configurations of physics might produce different but equally complex forms of existence we cannot currently imagine. We are judging the probability of our universe's settings from inside those very settings, which is exactly as absurd as a fish declaring that water is miraculous because it's the perfect liquid for fish to swim in. The fish exists because of the water, not the other way around. We exist because of these constants. We are not proof that the constants were designed for us. What if the real reason humans invented God was not spiritual, not philosophical, but neurological? A cognitive glitch baked into our survival software that we have mistaken for divine revelation. The human brain is a pattern recognition machine. It evolved to find faces in shadows, predators in rustling bushes, and intent behind random events. Because in the wild, the cost of a false positive, seeing a lion that isn't there, is far less than a false negative, missing a lion that is there. This cognitive bias is called agency detection, and it is so powerful, so deeply wired, that it fires even when there is no agent present. Thunder happens. The brain says, something caused that, something with intent. A child dies. The brain says, this means something, someone is responsible. This is not faith. This is a survival mechanism misapplied to the cosmos. And here is the most shocking part. The more psychologically stressed a person is, the more hyperactive their agency detection becomes. God does not get louder in moments of suffering. Your brain simply gets more desperate. The broken coffee cup does not signal divine punishment, it signals gravity. And gravity doesn't care about your feelings. What if I told you that this morning, somewhere in the world, someone dropped a coffee cup, it shattered on the floor, and in that single, ordinary, forgettable moment, the entire case for an all-powerful God was quietly, mathematically, permanently destroyed. Not by an atheist, not by a philosopher, not by someone angry at religion, by physics. By the same physics that built your smartphone, the same physics that flies your aeroplane, the same physics that powers the MRI machine that saved your mother's life. You have been told that God is all-powerful. You have been told God can do anything. You have been told miracles happen. You have been told that this universe, with all its staggering precision, could only have been designed. But nobody, and I mean nobody, ever sat you down and said, here are the laws of the universe. Here is what they actually forbid. And here is exactly why an all-powerful God would have to break every single one of them just to exist. That changes today. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you will never look at a broken coffee cup the same way again. The universe has a direction, not a moral direction, not a spiritual direction, a mathematical one. Right now, as you sit there, every atom in your body, every molecule in this room, every star in every galaxy is moving, relentlessly, irreversibly, from order toward disorder. Scientists call this entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. And it is not a suggestion, it is not a tendency, it is the single most tested, most confirmed, most unbreakable law that human science has ever produced. That broken coffee cup on the floor will never reassemble itself. The pieces will not fly back together. The coffee will not leap back into the cup. The heat will not reconcentrate. Not in 1 billion years, not in 1 trillion, not ever. The universe moves in one direction only, toward greater chaos, greater disorder, greater spreading of energy, and nothing in the history of scientific observation has ever reversed that process. Now hold that thought, hold it tightly, because if God is real, truly all-powerful, truly capable of miracles, then God must be able to reverse entropy. God must be able to take that shattered cup and reassemble it. God must be able to raise the dead, which means taking cells that have decayed, scattered, decomposed, lost their information, and reordering them back into life. But that is not a miracle. That is a violation of the most fundamental law of physics. And the God who violates physics is not a God who created physics. A God who breaks the laws of the universe is not a God who wrote those laws. What you are describing is not a creator. You are describing a glitch, a contradiction, an impossibility wearing a divine costume. Now, the theologians have an answer for this. They always do. They say, God is outside of time. God is beyond physics. The laws of the universe don't apply to God. And this sounds deeply profound until you open a physics textbook. Einstein demonstrated, not theorized, not suggested, but mathematically demonstrated that time is not a separate river flowing outside the universe. Time is not a container that holds reality. Time is woven into the fabric of space itself. Time bends near massive objects. Time slows at high velocities. Time, space, matter, and energy are one single unified structure. And that structure is not sitting inside anything. It is everything. There is no outside of space-time. There is no platform beyond reality where a God could stand and look in. Saying something exists outside of space-time is exactly like saying something exists outside of existence. It is a sentence that sounds meaningful. It has proper grammar. It triggers feelings of depth and mystery. But mathematically, it is complete nonsense. It describes nothing. It points to nowhere. The theologian's escape hatch. God is beyond physics is not a profound insight. It is a sleight of hand, a verbal trick, a way of making an untestable claim and calling it an answer. Real answers can be tested. Real answers can be wrong. God is beyond physics can never be wrong, because it can never be checked. And in science, a claim that can never be wrong is not powerful. It is meaningless. Then there is the quantum problem, and this one should keep every believer awake at night. At the subatomic level, the universe is not merely difficult to predict, it is fundamentally, irreducibly uncertain. Not because we lack instruments, not because our measurements are imperfect. The information literally does not exist. A particle does not have a definite position and a definite momentum at the same time. This is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and it is not a flaw in our knowledge, It is a feature of reality itself. The universe at its deepest level does not know what it's doing. So ask yourself, does God know the exact quantum state of every particle in the cosmos simultaneously? If yes, God is violating quantum mechanics, which is the most precisely verified theory in the history of physics, accurate to 1 part in a trillion. If no, God is not all-knowing. And if God is not all-knowing, God is not the God of any major religion ever described to you. There is no escape from this. The mathematics is not negotiable. Omniscience and quantum uncertainty cannot coexist in the same universe, and we know which one of those two things leaves evidence. Perhaps the most seductive argument you have heard for God is the fine-tuning argument. The gravitational constant, the speed of light, the mass of the electron. These values are so precisely calibrated that if any of them were even slightly different, stars wouldn't form, atoms wouldn't hold together, life would be impossible. This must have been designed. It sounds airtight. It sounds like science finally agreeing with religion. But here is what they never tell you. We have exactly one universe to observe. One. You cannot calculate a meaningful probability from a sample size of 1. That is not statistics. That is a feeling dressed up in mathematical language. We do not know what other configurations of physics might produce. We do not know how many other forms of complexity might arise under completely different constants. We cannot know, because we are inside this universe, judging it with instruments made of this universe, using a brain evolved by this universe. We are the fish, declaring that water is miraculous, because it is the perfect liquid for fish. Of course, this universe supports us. We evolved inside it. We are not evidence that it was designed for us. We are simply what happened. And finally, the deepest, most uncomfortable truth of all. The reason humans believe in God is not because God left evidence. It is because the human brain is a pattern recognition machine that evolved over millions of years to find agents behind events, to see intent in randomness, to hear voices in the wind. Because in the ancient wilderness, the cost of imagining a predator that wasn't there was far less than missing one that was. This cognitive architecture saved your ancestors. It kept the species alive. It was brilliant evolutionary engineering. But it was never designed to evaluate the cosmos. When the thunder cracked and your ancestor said, "Something caused that," they were not receiving divine revelation. They were running a survival algorithm. When suffering strikes and the brain screams, "This means something, someone is responsible, someone is watching," that is not faith. That is a neurological response to stress. That is the agency detection system misfiring on the universe. God does not get louder when you suffer. Your brain simply gets more desperate. The broken coffee cup does not mean anything. It obeyed gravity. It obeyed entropy. It shattered because the universe has laws, precise, unbreakable, indifferent, beautiful laws. And those laws do not pause for your pain, your prayers, or your need for meaning. Here is what I want you to take from this. The universe is under no obligation to be simple. It is under no obligation to comfort you. But here is what it does offer you. Something far more extraordinary than comfort. It offers you truth, verifiable, testable, reproducible truth. The kind of truth that actually works. The kind of truth that builds hospitals and maps genomes and lands probes on the moons of Saturn. A broken coffee cup is not a theological crisis. It is a physics demonstration. Entropy is real. Quantum uncertainty is real. The curvature of space-time is real. And any God who must violate all three to exist is not a God. It is a logical contradiction. You do not need a miracle to find the universe magnificent. You just need to look at it honestly. The coffee cup broke. The universe held its laws. And the laws, cold, elegant, eternal, were more than enough.